Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Darren Barkman's channel here. YouTube, Facebook, and Parler. Parler. Don't know. Haven't gotten an answer on that one yet. But I do have the videos going now on YouTube, and if you want to catch them, a little sneak peek, catch them the night before they go up on social media, just go to my YouTube channel, Dr. Darren Barkman, and all of the videos in this series are there so you can catch up. We are in a series entitled What is the Gospel? And I was very, very burdened that in our day, the idea of what the true message of salvation in Jesus Christ is getting lost. And I wanted to go back to the scriptures and talk about exactly what the scriptures say is the gospel. And we're doing a little bit of background work just to understand where Paul was coming from, and we're studying Romans chapters 1, 2, and 3. Just again, a little background just so that we all have an idea of what Paul was really getting at in the impact, the cultural impact, the eternal impact of what Paul was talking about. So we're moving on, and we're in Romans chapter 1, verse 16. And it says this, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek." Now, it doesn't seem earth-shattering now to be talking about Jews and Greeks, Jews and Gentiles, both having access to faith in Christ, or salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. We have lived under this idea of Christianity for nearly 2,000 years, and we've kind of lost, I think, the idea that this was just a radical concept to the Jews, particularly 2,000 years ago. Let's go all the way back. Again, Genesis chapter 12, we see God speak to Abram, and he declares that he is going to build a nation out of Abram and from his people. And what you see through the Old Testament is the Jewish people, the nation of Israel, being God's chosen people. God plucked them out, said, "I'm going to make you my people. You didn't deserve it. It's not like you're doing anything special. In fact, you're doing everything you can to run away from me, but I have chosen you to be my people." And all of the other nations around the Jews basically had no hope. There was no access to this God because God was the God of Israel. Now, you could be kind of grafted in, you could be given kind of special rights into the nation, but really it was the nation of Israel. Those were God's people. Then all of a sudden in the Old Testament, God starts prophesying, God starts saying other things. Isaiah, the prophet, you start hearing these rumblings of how God is going to provide salvation for all nations. Isaiah 42, Isaiah 49. In chapter 49 specifically, God says, "It's too small a thing if I just save my people and the people of Jacob. My salvation is going to go to all nations. It's going to go to every person." And what really the Jews would think through the Old Testament times was, well, yeah, okay, they're going to be saved. There's going to be people that God is going to pluck from the Gentile nations and going to let them come in. But Isaiah 60, verses 1, 2, and 3, Micah chapter 4, talk about the nation of Israel still kind of being in authority over the Gentiles. So there's still kind of a hierarchy that goes, even in salvation being for everybody, it's still for the Jew mostly. And the Jews have special rights. They get to check off the box just because they're of the nation of Israel. They have kind of the inroad. They get the, like at the airport, they get the special quick line, through the security, and they get to pass go and not collect $200. They go right to the head of the line. But what we see in the New Testament is that salvation is available for Jew and for Gentile, for all nations. And there's no hierarchy. There's no special protections being a Jew or being a Gentile. Christ came and he died for all kinds of people. He died for every race, every nation, every culture, every. There's no one on the face of the earth that does not have access to God through Jesus Christ if they call upon God in faith through the Son, Jesus Christ. And that's what Paul is saying in Romans chapter 1. Salvation is the power of God for everyone who believes. Anyone, everyone who believes, they can be saved, Jew and Greek alike. And you also see in Romans 1, before verse 16, Paul talks about being obligated to the Greeks and to the barbarians, to the wise and to the foolish. That's why he's eager to preach the gospel in Rome, because he has an obligation to preach the gospel. Remember, in Acts chapter 9, God calls Paul to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. That was not heard of. That was not done back in that day. We're going to see next time, we'll look at Acts chapter 10 when God speaks to Peter and says, "Rise, kill, and eat. Why are you calling unclean what I've made clean?" And what God was saying was he was revealing to Paul in chapter 9, revealing to Peter in chapter 10, that the gospel is to go to the Gentiles. And the gospel is to go to all nations. And the Hebrew and Greek word for all is all. Now, we'll talk a little bit also as we go through Romans 1, 2, and 3, how it's not everyone has access. God's not a universalist, and not at the very end that everybody's going to come to some kind of saving faith. God does have an elect people. God does know whose are his. I mean, God had his chosen people in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel. God has his chosen elect through the New Testament, through faith in Jesus Christ as well. But we don't know who that is. But what we do know is that God has opened the door wide through Christ, that it's not just the nation of Israel. Any nation, any person, anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And that's an amazing truth. And it kind of dispels some of, in my opinion, the racial stuff that's going on in our culture right now. There's no one better than any other in God's economy. To the Lord, Jew, Gentile, black, white, it doesn't matter. All are equal. All have equally sinned. All can come to saving faith in Jesus Christ. There's one Lord, one Jesus, one salvation through the shed blood of Christ, by grace, through faith. And that access is for anyone. Doesn't matter how much melanin's in your skin, doesn't matter the pigment, doesn't matter where you come from. If you call on the name of the Lord, you are saved. We're going to look at that a little bit more next time. Again, we're going to look at Acts chapter 10, look at how the Gentiles were continually grafted in, and look at how Paul talked in other places in the epistles about how God has broken down a wall of separation and division by Jesus Christ coming and the saving work that he did. It's a glorious truth. And in the day that we're living in now, where there's so much division and so much anger and so much rage, it's a great message to preach to our culture, that Jesus has come and he has torn down that wall of separation. Jew, Gentile, black, white, doesn't matter what race you are. We are all able to come as one body to the cross to receive the salvation that God has given to us through Jesus. We'll meet up again on Monday and we'll talk more about this. Until then, the Lord bless you. Have a great night.